Welcome to the first video in our Getting Started with StartRisk series. In this video, we are going to walk through the New Business Wizard. So the first step in the New Business Wizard is the Create a Business screen. And in this screen, we're going to record some basic information about our organization. You can see here, you can add in your business name and website. It's important if you do have a website that you do enter it, because the StartRisk AI will actually scrape that website in the background, take useful information about your business from the website and use that when it makes AI suggestions later on in the app. So definitely include that if you have one. In terms of industry, we have a drop-down list that you can select from. If your industry isn't specifically listed there, you can select other. We'd like you to enter your revenue range as well. So we have some predefined revenue range limits. Just pick the one that's most appropriate for your organization. Similarly with business size, there's definitions in there. They typically talk about the number of employees and complexity of your business. So have a read of those definitions and pick the one that's most appropriate for your business. If your business operates across international borders, so multinationally or internationally, select that multinational button as well. All of that information gets used as context about your business when we make AI suggestions. Under the Advanced Setup section, you can add in a logo for your business if you'd like, and you can have something called a URL identifier that you define, or if you just leave that blank, we'll assign one randomly to your organization. Once you've filled all of that in, you can just click Next. So after completing the basic information about your organization, you'll be taken to the Initial Risk Classes screen. On this screen, you'll see a number of AI-generated recommendations for strategic risk classes. So risk classes are groups of like risks that are strategically relevant to your business. So they're things that we want to keep an eye on to make sure that we're managing those risks to our business. StartRisk will divide those recommendations into two categories, typical and additional. The difference being that typical risk classes are ones that are very highly likely to be relevant for your organization, and they're things that you would typically see in place. The additional ones may be relevant to your organization, and you should review those, and if they're appropriate, you can select them. Of course, if you need to, you can always add your own custom risk classes if there's things specific to your business that haven't been identified here. And when you go in and add your own risk classes, you also have the ability to take one of the existing risk classes above or a range of standardized ones that we've identified, select that, and then modify that template and save it as your own. So I would recommend somewhere between 5 and 8 risk classes. That's generally a good number of classes to allow you to segregate your risk classes appropriately so that they make sense, but not too many that you end up being a bit unsure about what class a particular risk should fit into. Now, you don't need to worry about having too few or too many at the moment, because later on in the app, you'll be able to modify, add and remove risk classes as your business grows and develops, or as you become more comfortable with the tool. So the next step then in the New Business Wizard is defining risk consequence definitions. Now, risk consequence definitions are common definitions that will appear in the app that allow people to be speaking the same language when they rate risks. So for example, you can see here that our AI has generated some recommended definitions for financial risk class, for insignificant, minor and moderate, and all the way through to major and extreme. Now, it's important at this stage that you look at those definitions, make sure they're tailored and fit for purpose for your organization. For example, this says variation in revenue or costs of 1% of annual budget. So you could change that to a different percentage, or if you prefer a dollar value, you could put a dollar value in there. And then when somebody says, oh, well, this is less than 1% of budget, you can say, well, that's an insignificant risk to our business. Or for example, if it was 20% of budget, you might say that in this case, that's a high risk to the business. And it's going to allow you to rate risks in that way. Once you're happy with those definitions, keep that in the back of your mind and move down to the appetite section. So we set a risk appetite for each of our risk classes, and we have 4 categories that we use in StartRisk. So avoid, which means we'll take all steps that we can to make sure this risk doesn't happen, right through to encourage, which means we will actually be willing to take on this kind of risk if we think there's really big benefits for us in doing so. So these things, again, will be customized to your organization, and they're specific to each risk class. So you might have a very low appetite for financial risk, and you might choose to avoid that kind of risk, but you might have a higher appetite for research and development risk where you're willing to take larger bets in relation to that. Once you've selected your appetite, click Next and repeat that process for each of the risk classes that you've selected. So having completed that process and selected your risk appetite and defined your risk consequence criteria for each of the risk classes you selected, you've completed the new business wizard, and you'll find yourself on this dashboard, and you'll notice that it looks a little empty at the moment. The next step, as the risk class tasks are telling you, is to start adding risks. And we'll cover that off in the second video in our Getting Started with StartRisk series.